All right, our next speaker is Chris Steelman. Chris is an assistant professor and the founding program director of the Cardiac Specialist Program at Weber State University, located in Ogden, Utah. This program attracts physicians, nurses, and technologists from the U.S. and around the world. Chris is an internationally recognized speaker and has addressed audiences in over 20 countries and has contributed to numerous books and publications. Most recently, he was appointed chair of the Global Engagement Task Force by CCI. Chris serves as the co-chair of the American College of Cardiology Allied Health Professionals CV team section work group and is a fellow of the Alliance of Cardiovascular Professionals. He's completed 3 terms as chair of the ASRT Cardiac Interventional and Vascular Interventional Technology chapter and currently serves as the chair of the World Radiography Educational Trust Foundation. I don't know if he's met the criteria to speak up here. I feel very overwhelmed. Please welcome Chris.
Hello, I'm Chris. Let me get settled here. This whole thing makes me nervous. It's clear. I have to hold my stomach in the entire time. And I have no slides, so I can't pretend I'm not reading slides. But I do have a timer. This what we're using? I should have prepped. How do I change the slides? The big green one. That makes sense. That's me. Cardiac cath lab. Most people know me as that's what I do. 17 years in cardiac cath lab. I've worked in 18 cath labs around the world, and then I got into teaching. Here's the secret. Here's the parallel track of my career. Might say my secret life. I've been involved in education, being an advocate for increasing access to education for those people who don't have access to it. So I've been with this organization probably for about 15 years. I'm currently the chair, and we endeavor to improve education in the science and practice of radiography, radiation therapy, and other subjects around the world. Now, when we first started, we were shipping books out, right, before the internet. So it was very expensive, and books don't last very long in some communities. If I hand somebody a book, no one else is going to see it. People have to ship it to me, then I have to turn around, and we literally fill barrels full of books and send them off around the world. I thought we could do better. I've always thought we could do better. Then the internet started evolving. And so I wanted to learn, and at the same time I'm doing these things, I'm studying for my master's degree in educational technology. How can we leverage technology to deliver education? And so, instead of reading about it, I started going places, right? I started going to South Africa, Nepal, and even in Jamaica to see how they're learning. How else would we know? And so one of the things that I found out was we have, it's starting to get dry here, we have the technology, right? Countries around the world, even the most low-resource countries, have the technology, whether it's an iPhone or computers. So this was a township in South Africa, displaced people during the apartheid in South Africa. 33,000 people, probably 40,000 now, minimal water supply. They have the highest level of E. coli in the world. The streams that you see running down the street is not water. Well, it's water, but it's been processed. So I found out, well, yeah, we have computers. That's not an issue. But we need to make this process of delivering education more efficient. And so all of us have PowerPoints that we use to teach. And what happens to them? they sit on your computer till the next semester or the next year. And so we have all this wonderful knowledge in PowerPoint slides that are not necessarily educational, specific enough to use for distance learning. I had trouble with that one. So I developed a system, very easy to use system, where we could take Patrick's brilliant PowerPoint, but make it into a standalone educational content, modular, and you needed no tools in order to make it. MS Paint, PowerPoint, and you were good to go. We could deliver that on phone, by CD, by even in print. So this was a multi avenues of distribution. That was the goal. And so it became popular. And so I got invited to the World Health Organization to speak about this. How do we deliver education? Well, as I'm being a cath lab person and now a professor, I started being asked about, can you come to our country and tell us how to grow a program, how to increase access? Now, Sri Lanka is pretty cool. They have a National Education Day where the country shuts down. They have for agriculture, education, healthcare, all these different things. And I went and I speak about how to increase capacity. And then I started thinking, well, if we're doing this in other countries, a lot of these techniques that we use, we can apply here in the United States to grow our own programs. So hopefully there'll be some things in here that you can apply to your own program. So here's my vision: increase education in regions facing healthcare workforce shortages and uneven distribution of professionals with the goal of improving healthcare. And here's the challenge: it's urban-centric, right? If you live in Sri Lanka or you live in various parts of the world, the difference between very rural and densely populated cities can be as little as 20 miles or 100 miles. The problem is all the education is focused in these dense areas. So education programs are limited in areas, to rural areas. There's lots of words on here because people ask me to share my slides, and if I just handed everyone pictures, you wouldn't get anything out of it. So please excuse the words. Even if we have this capacity to deliver education virtually, we don't have people to do it efficiently and with positive outcomes. And students have different challenges. Now, these are all the challenges in developing countries. Urban areas frequently draw potential healthcare professionals away from rural areas. We know that's true even in this country. And some don't return. Same as physicians in many parts of the world. They train to become a physician, and they just want to get out of their country. And we see the same thing in healthcare. I do a lot of work in India. Their goal is to go to the UAE or go somewhere in the Middle East. So even when we train them, now we have got to get them to stay where they are. And the same problems are here, right? When in Utah, for example, where I teach in Salt Lake City, and Ogden to be specific, they come to class, well, they get a job in the area. So we haven't done much to keep them teaching in their own areas. So who are our learners? This was the National Center for Education Statistics. Here's what we used to think. They're under 25, they're enrolled in a college with 12 months, within 12 months after graduating, they live near the campus, and they're taking 15 or more credits. All right? That's no longer the case. It's never been the case in other countries, but even more so here. So the challenge is, how do we overcome these challenges to make school work for today's modern student? Okay, so there's some key components to educational outreach, whether we're in another country or whether we're here. Geographic focus. These areas can be remote, economically disadvantaged, characterized by limited educational infrastructure. That's true in Sri Lanka, that's true in the United States. We need to provide better access to education using technology. And we need to create customized programs for our learners, no matter where they are. All right? We need to collaborate between educational institutions, government agencies, community organizations, and so on. And we have to promote equity and inclusion. These are problems, as I said, in all parts of the world. And our online learning platforms, digital resources can help learners. We talked about that. So here's Ogden, right? Each one of these little dots is 7,500 people. Okay, so here we are in Utah. Right, so how do we have a successful program, especially in cardiovascular technology? Well, when I go to these other countries now, and speaking on the secret side of my life, the education part, we talk about how to develop this, and we use Weber State University as an example. Okay, here's the number of radiography programs, 734. That's astounding if you look at how many programs that we have. And yet, this little school in Utah is managing to stay competitive, if not leading the world in this. And we'll talk about how. All right, so 24 students. That's the average in those 734 schools. 24 students, 2023. We've got 238 in the middle of nowhere. Right? I'm from New Jersey. It's rural, right? Salt Lake City's the big city. There's just part of our class, right? So how do we get 238 students? How do we graduate more students than anyone else in the country? Probably in the world, we're graduating 163 a year, right? Because we're innovative. We go to where the students are, right? So when I talk about this old concept of students have to come to our school, they have to come to our university, what is inhibiting us from traveling to Colorado, Montana, Arizona, all these different places, and teaching there? Because in a lot of these places, students can't leave. They're tied to a family business, they have to work, they can't upend their lives. So Weber State said, we'll come to you, right? Whether it's down the road, down I-15, or Colorado, New Mexico, southern Idaho, get Wyoming. They have 2 associate's level programs in radiography. There's 32 hospitals there. They just can't keep up. So we wonder why there's a shortage in the bigger cities. In these rural areas, there's even more so. So we go to Montana and Arizona. We teach in hospitals. We rent out a room at a hotel. The teachers go overnight. Faculty goes overnight. They go up and they train people. And we are able to do that because we're a hybrid program. Okay, Bozeman, Montana. I know, right? I'm from New Jersey, and I'm going to Bozeman, Montana. So it's a 6-hour drive. The cattle ranching, right? You see it in the movies. Anyone from Montana? I don't want to say anything bad. But people come to their state meeting, traveling 8 hours to get there. We can't ask them to come to Salt Lake City, to Ogden, right? So we have a program up there. Here's another niche that we do. Right? There's 300,000 members of the Navajo Nation, right? So we're looking for opportunities, pockets of students. We're looking at underserved areas and going there and teaching there. And we can do that, again, because we're a hybrid, so we'll talk about that in a second. Here's another niche that we found, right? When you go and train in the Army, you don't necessarily get credentialed. So now we have a program where we can take that training, give them experiential credit. Now, all these things add up to maybe 20 students here, 20 students there, 10 here. But the effort for us to go to these areas and create custom programs. Navajo Nation, for example, all of our content is specific. We learn the same thing when we learn when we deliver education in other countries. It's if you show a bunch of white people standing around in pristine lab coats on a $3 million machine, you get shut down. Somebody living in India, the rural parts of India, they don't want to see that. They automatically know that this is not for me. There's a learning barrier before you even get started. So we customize everything. The way I do it internationally is all of us, when we're doing PowerPoints, we pick a color scheme, right? A little bar on top, what colors am I going to use? We just use the colors from their flag, and immediately they're seeing. And we take pictures of them. So like, yeah, that's me, right? We're removing one of the barriers to education. Partnerships, right? We see this rise in educational programs being offered by hospitals. Well, we go out and partner with the hospitals, right? So Banner Health has 2 different programs. In Arizona, you can become a practical technologist at an entry level, right? Same as that in Arizona. So we go out to hospitals and we say, we will work with you. You can have your people employed there. We can get them registered and get them working, and we'll come to you. We're not asking them. This way they can go to class and then go to work same day, so they're not losing staffing as we go. So how do we get all this done? Here's a typical schedule. All right, so this is my program. The reason I moved out is we have a master's level degree in cardiac cath lab. That doesn't make any sense. What does, if you have a bachelor's program or you have a bachelor's degree and you want to go on to get a master's degree, we'll talk about the people we attract for that program in a second. So Thursdays and Fridays, students come to class. It's incredibly affordable. Because we do a hybrid program, we can count them as in-state students. So we're around $20,000 for a master's degree, most of our programs. But they'll come in twice a semester, and then we'll do 2 online classes. Frees up my time, so I teach 14 different classes at Weber State University. All of our programs are like this. And why does it work? Well, as I said, we bring them in from the local communities, but literally from across the country, right? So if you're in Tampa, right, and you want to go get a master's degree, or you want to come to Weber, you're coming twice a semester, right? So it's relatively affordable, and then the other 2 times. In fact, when we start doing unique programs, we get people from around the world. So I have, believe it or not, for a graduate degree program, we have 25 applicants and another 15 that are from abroad. So we have 3 students from India. Next year, we're taking Pakistan, Ireland, because they can't get the programs. They can't get the education that they need. And through our curriculum, our whole goal is not only to make it affordable and easier to access, but we're teaching, our goal is to create future-ready, in our case, cath lab technologists. So we're teaching AI and teaching multimodality imaging. It's a great environment. We have all the imaging experts there. You know, I'm kind of an outcast, but it is the School of Radiologic Technology. So we have people, MRI and CT, so they're learning multimodality imaging. Not to do it, but just to understand the images that they're going to be seeing as we get into more structural work. So we do, and we talked about AI before. We teach AI. We teach how to use AI, ChatGPT, and some of these other things. We can't ignore it. It's here, right? So we educate our students how to use it successfully, ethically. All right, so here's an example of another technique that Weber State uses. Entry-level courses. So we have a certificate of proficiency, right? Right out of high school, you want to dip your big toe into healthcare, get certified as a limited practical technologist, okay? We get 105 students from all over the country come to do that program, all right? Here's the cool thing, 80% of them go on, right, into our bachelor's degree programs. So we're using this model and applying it to the cardiovascular world. You can see we have 3 master's degree programs on the bottom. Now, when we do this, we put in, to accomplish this proficiency certificate, we build in prerequisites for the other course, the other coursework. So they come in, they're taking these courses, they can work. Now they can work during school. And if they want to go to be an RT, cool. You've got your prerequisites for that. Ultrasound or any of the other programs we have. So now they've already gotten started. They're in the academic way of thinking. And here's what we're doing in the cardiac program. So, cardiac technician program. We have 30 students a semester coming for that program. Right, we've run it now. We're going into our third semester, our third cohort, and we have 45 applications for that. Right? So if we're thinking all these people are going on to, bachelor's degree or other programs, you can go from that proficiency certificate right into a Bachelor of Science program. Right? So now we have 2025 cardiac specialists at a bachelor's degree. That will branch off into cath lab NEP. Right? So it's a nice transition. And then if they want to go on to a master's degree, they can. So who goes to a master's degree in cath lab, right? Students pursuing credentialing. I've got students in the master's degree program who don't know where the heart is. If I told them it was in their foot, they would believe me. But then I have other people, physicians, 4 or 5 physicians. That's stressful, teaching physicians. Nurses, and we have technologists who have had 10, 15 years of experience. It's a great party, right? That's how I pick my class. Because I think, and we'll talk about this in a second, that people with no experience bring almost as much to the program and our discussions as people with 10 years of experience, because we don't see the content like somebody with fresh eyes. I always say when I work on committees and things like that, it's the new people. I'm on the exam committee. A bunch of us sit around for 5 years, we look at all the same questions, someone new comes in and says, this doesn't make sense to anybody. We've lost that perspective. So we bring people in, physicians, nurses, and they're all equally treated equally. It makes for a good time. So what do we need to start this? Not everybody has enough money, even in the United States, to have a learning management system. But there's inexpensive alternatives. We use Canvas. Anyone else using Canvas? Oh my gosh, they got a good market share. I hate Canvas. One little mistake on a test Monday morning. I'd only read my emails because everything's due Sunday night. Monday morning, I'm trying to get off to a good start, and there's 10 emails arguing the answer to a question that I just entered in incorrectly. Right? Or I put the wrong date on something, and the whole class is freaking out about it. So I spent half of my Monday morning looking at all, because my canvases were perfect. Never perfect. I make a mistake, and it costs me half a day to fix them. So Malcolm Knowles. Why would we go into teaching with any less level expectation of best practices in research than we do in medicine, right? We perform a cardiac cath that's all based on research. We're working on hearts, but we're working on minds. So why don't we need to be prepared, equally as prepared, to be able to go and put into action some of these best practices and work with what research has told us to work with. So Malcolm Knowles, the biggest obstacle to achievement of the full potential of adult education that has been tied to and hamstrung by the concepts of traditional education of children. Right? So how many people do we work with that have no background in teaching? How do they teach? Well, this is how I was taught, so I'm just going to teach it again, regardless of how outdated it is. And believe me, when you go to a hybrid program where you're teaching online, for it to be successful, you have to keep students engaged, and you have to use the information that's available to us to make it efficient, because it can be a disaster if done inefficiently. So instead of passive transmittal, we're trying to get learners actively to participate in the learning process. And we talked about best practices. So we got 4 principles. Pedagogy, right? For children, this is andragogy. What do they want? They need to be involved in how their training is planned, delivered, and executed. First day of class, when I get the students, and like most people in using Canvas or some of these other things, we have modules. So I sit them down. I said, what order do you think these should go in? And they just look at me like, what? I'm like, you guys decide how much time you need for each one of these. You guys decide what should come first. I know in my head where I want to guide them, but now they're involved. They're adults. The less we dictate to them, graduate students, they will question everything. Some of them have been in a cath lab longer than myself. Give them the opportunity to say, I don't think this is right? I don't think this order is right. They buy in immediately to that. Adults gain more knowledge when they can pull from past experiences, right? So when you have a mixed class, you know, when we accept people, we tend to accept this homogenous group of people who have impressed us enough, right? But to accept them into our programs, but they're not always the best for the other members of the class. So that's why I take people with no experience at all, right? Again, they're seeing things like haven't seen them in a while. They need to solve problems and use reasoning. So problem-based learning, ill-defined questions, we'll talk about that in a second. And most of all, how do I use this information now? So our clinical experiences run at the same time as our class experiences, okay? Which is very difficult in a lot of healthcare because they don't always match. First time we meet after they start clinicals, he's already scrubbing in, and they won't even let me in the room, right? So how do we make that work? They are in charge of their clinical experience. They are in charge. When you have this many students, we treat them like adults. They have goals to match, and we sit down. What do you think you can accomplish? We get them involved. Transparency. Probably the biggest part of the program, the part I'm most proud of. We're teaching them. We're just not saying, here, do this discussion on this arbitrary discussion prompt. They want to know why. Chris, why are you making me do this? I know I did. This doesn't make any sense. Well, explain to them before we even assign it to them. Here's what we're looking for. So we're teaching people to teach at the same time. Because all of us in healthcare, no matter where we are, we have to engage with patients. We have to be able to verbalize what we're doing and why we're doing it. So they get an education in education as well. And it makes them feel more comfortable with. So now they've picked the order that they want to do these modules. I give them more modules. If they don't want to do one, I throw it out. They'll see it again. It's empowering them. And then I teach them, and again, there's research on all these slides. They perform better. They stay more persistent in their college, and they're more likely to stay. So I'm a constructivist, right? So I believe that students learn more when they're making things. So all of my discussions, we all use discussions, we should be. They're a big pain in the neck because they take forever to correct, right? So we build rubrics behind them. It will eat a lot of your time up. But we have time because I'm teaching 4 times a semester. That's just one program. But we have time in between to grade these. And we give them the opportunity to, number one, I'm not grading you whether you're right or wrong. I'm grading you based on did you think? Did you figure it out? Even if you're completely off base. And of course, they have to respond to those. So we learn by doing. So we're not all RTs in my program. So what's a good project to teach them radiation safety? Give them a module, learn about radiation safety, but then build a product, right? They will then take what they've learned and go into their own cath lab and do an assessment, a checklist. How is my cath lab, in this case, performing as far as radiation safety? That's an example. They want to work on projects. Collaboration and discussion. They write a thesis. And if it's not a thesis at the undergraduate levels, but we come in and just talk about the process of doing this. Not what challenges do you have? Are you having trouble finding information, sourcing, formatting, these kind of things? Number one, we get to talk about it. The individual email asking me about something usually ends up as an announcement, right? Because I figure if one is struggling with Stealer, so we bring them into class, and then they start to feel comfortable. Oh my gosh, Alicia's having trouble with the same thing I am. I'm too scared to ask. Well, the next class they're asking. Reflection, that's where the discussions come in for our clinical courses. What's the biggest mistake that you made? Right? It's an honest question. I put a stent in someone that I shouldn't have. Wrong place. Thought I was prepping the stent. Boom, there it was, sitting in a vessel, right? I'm not ashamed to admit it. Didn't hurt the patient. But they now are able to share things, again, where they're making mistakes. I don't know about you guys, but I learn more from my mistakes than I ever learned from doing things perfectly all the time. So we reflect on that. We do interviews, right? So when I was a traveler, typically in a cath lab, you'd see a bunch of people huddled in the control room of the cath lab thinking, I wonder what wire that doctor uses, or I wonder if he comes out of, these things that are doctor specific, and they're all trying to figure it out. After working in about, in all the labs that I have, I just walked in and asked. It's pretty simple, right? So we have them do cardiologist interviews. What do you expect? What is your ideal, person? And you can do this with any modality, but first of all, it facilitates conversation between the big bad cardiologist and the little student, and the excuse is, Chris made me do it, right? So if they feel awkward about it, I have to do it because it's making me ask you these questions. And all of a sudden, now the cardiologist is thinking, that person's interested. They're interested in what I'm thinking, what I want. And the student learns that you're going to have to learn to talk to the radiologist, the cardiologist, whoever. And so, as a constructivist, we want things that produce a product. And in the process of them producing a product, they retain information, and they're just not memorizing things. Problem-based learning. Okay, I think we're all familiar with it, but start with a problem. Students take responsibility for learning, deciding what information they need. That encourages collaborative learning. I'm running out of time. They can integrate multiple disciplines. So why not send your students to MRI and have them observe? Ask questions, right? There are peripheral in all of our modalities. There's other modalities that contribute to us. So send them out. Let them take, we do 12 hours. Spend 12 hours in CT. Discover what that's all about. They not only start to look at the images, they know how they're collected, and because it does relate to what we're doing. Ill-defined problems. This is the coolest thing ever, right? Everybody, we're making assignments and we're spoon-feeding them, right? Here, A, B, C, answer these questions. No, I just say, write me about, the problems, write about the sterile technique, and that's it. So what do I get back Monday morning? What do you want? I don't want to be wrong. I don't care if you're wrong. Think about it. Ill-defined questions. So there's no clean definition. There's multiple solutions. I don't care about their solutions. You have to integrate the knowledge. It's a time-consuming process, right? But adults, once they get that they're not going to get dinged for points or whatever on the rubric, it's very worth it, right? Because we want them to integrate this knowledge. We want them making things with it. We want them to understand this is useful. It's just not a quiz, 10-point quiz. No, we do quiz. You have to understand some facts, right? Here's the other thing. If they come to class, they can go back and do anything they want. You miss class, right? Students don't show up for class, whether it's online or they don't feel like flying in from California to attend class, right? Fine. But if you do come to class, you can go back and do a discussion again. What's the goal? Grades? I could care less about grades. I want them to learn. right? So if they come to class and they participate, sure, you missed a day of class, you can go back and do that test over again. You can go back and do that discussion. You can get the grade you want, but 50% actually do it. It's a lot easier at the end of the semester. But again, we have less emphasis on grades, because that's all they're worried about, and learning. And competencies. You know, we have got to start, if we want to be competitive with some of these other credentialing agencies, we've got to be able to produce evidence that they're competent, right? So we use the ARRT guide, in our case, for cath labs. And we sit down with them and say, first of all, when you're coming from Rhode Island, Texas, all these other places, you find your clinical site. I'm not looking for them. It's hard enough once you tell me you want to start a clinical experience in Rhode Island, but you're managing it. And they go in with a different format. Here's what I have to accomplish. How can we do that? Is this a hospital where I can accomplish, 60 right hearts or some of the other things? And then in the competitive workplace, my students are making more money because they go in with a portfolio. Here's my thesis. Here's the best discussions I've had. Here's my examples. And here's my competencies. Well, you're not an RT. We've done the same thing that's required of the ARRT in our program as well. And I will say that they learn more about fluoroscopy-specific radiation safety than radiologic technologists. Easily. Don't get me started with that. But here's the other thing we do. Case studies. Everyone doing case studies? You have to. We do 5 of them. It doesn't seem like a lot, but they present it not only to the other members of class, but we invite faculty in. We invite all the other classes in, right? Because when you can look at a case and then teach it, and when you're practicing, find the gaps, right, in your understanding. Don't put it on a slide unless you can explain it. It's hard to do a case study with normal blood sats, all the normals, and say this is why, this is occurring or that's happening. So the whole idea is to engage the students. Some of the other things we do to grow our program. How simple is an online recognition evening? Right? So we recognize people from around the world. Our own Jarrell. Where's Jarrell? Is he still here? We gave Jarrell an award. So it does a couple things, right? It shows students that we appreciate people who are making improvements in our profession. We bring in people from industry, people from different organizations. So what do? They post about it. They tell all their friends. We get this viral marketing going of our program. They go out and they say, I got this award. These are on LinkedIn. And we recognize international participants as well. So how do we get international students? When this guy starts bragging about his award in Thailand, we get a flood of applicants from Thailand. So very simple, costs nothing. And we recognize the students. And we tell them day one, we have leadership awards and outstanding student awards. Everybody likes a little recognition. So all different programs. You can see giving, leadership in industry, international collaboration. And we select people, not only one, that are going to benefit or help them professionally, and they're getting an award, but now they're going out and telling people about it. Helps us market. So, to sum it up, our students are changing. Education is changing. We cannot continue to rely on things that we used to rely on in order to grow our programs. We can go to students. We can go go on an overnight trip to Bozeman, Montana in January. And put on, the Holiday Inn. We'll have 20 students there. And then the hybrid instruction allows us to make these trips. So none of the programs that we offer are your typical classroom schedule. So institutions can extend their reach, improve student accessibility, and cultivate a vibrant academic experience when we use the tools that we have, and especially the technology that we have, to modernize our programs. And we keep them active and engaged by problem-based learning, projects, and putting together stuff. So I'm taking advantage of this networking opportunity. I'm going to, believe it or not, Hong Kong on Sunday to talk about those two things. But here's what I'm working about. Occupational health risks in the cardiac cath lab. Aren't we tired of seeing all this information done for physicians? We're in the cath lab more than the physicians are. Yet we don't have, it's one of our problems, we don't have any research that is specific for us. We have to start doing that. And then we have to find an outlet where we can publish them. There's not a lot out there. I'm looking at healthcare education. Again, let's ask the cardiologist, what's important to you? What should these people be studying? Get them engaged in this process instead of wondering. We do a task analysis, but we're just asking ourselves. Why don't we ask the cardiologist what's important to them, right? Do you know that the person standing next to you was, I don't want to say anything negative, not academically prepared and clinically competent, trained on the job, or would you rather have someone who actually has those credentials? I'd like to find out, so we're doing research on that. And can tests truly teach? So we talk about in psychometrics, it's a teaching question. You know, we don't want to use teaching questions, right? And exam committees. I do. Because when you're in a heightened state, I just remember when I was younger coming out of RT school, everybody huddling in the hallway, question 94. Did you remember what it, that's my timer, I'm sorry. But it's amazing how you remember the entire question that you think you got wrong because you just struggled on it, right? And then you can come back and almost recite it verbatim, right, to your classmates. Well, what if we did teaching questions? What if we put in there a little extra fact? So the preliminary research is we give them the wrong formatted teaching questions, right? Ones with another fact in there as part of the question. We teach, when we test them the next day on those facts. And a surprising number of students do well on those tests because they're in that heightened state. We don't often get that in the classroom, but during a test, you're on your game, right? You have a heightened sense, so we go back and test them, and they do extraordinarily well in stuff we've never taught. We just added it in the test. So I'm hoping to find some research collaborators where if you have a better idea, these things are already started, but I need help. So if you're interested in research, we've got to do some. We have, whatever modality we're into, we have specific issues that aren't often addressed. And I know in the cardiac cath lab, we don't even have a place to publish them, right? So we've got to find these things. We need to become a more vibrant community and get some research on us. If 50% of cardiologists are exiting the field because of orthopedic problems, how many cath lab people who are scrubbing twice as many cases are having the same thing? We need to quantify it. So that's all I got for you. I appreciate the opportunity very much. Questions? Oh, Patrick, go. Oh, thanks.
You are one of my mentors of how to reach out to communities and things like that worldwide, and are really done an amazing job. So thank you very much for all that you've done for health.
Oh, thanks.
A question and a request for actually your college.
Sure.
My first question, though, is we've run into problems trying to branch out with online education, with states locking us out because of the reciprocity agreements and saying, well, if you want to teach an online course in my state,
Yes.
you have to pay $60,000 or $70,000 or I think California is like $5,000 per student.
Right.
How did you navigate it?
We let the hospitals argue for us. Yeah. They're short on staff, right? How do we, we don't get into that.
Because that's the biggest thing that we've had trouble with is they're just like, no, 5,000 per student because you want to reach out to our community. The second thing is, can you consider reaching out
I don't know. I don't know if we've done that yet.
Because it's something I would really suggest because they're in desperate need as an application is.
Yeah.
Things like that, so.
Yeah, these are incredible communities, and if you ever go into them, and some of them aren't defined by states, they could care less. Don't even come onto the res, right? But even if you don't have to go out of state, there's opportunities within state to do this. And I still think it's important for them to come in to campus. So we do a white coat, right, ceremony. Gets them in, so they see the campus, they see, they get that energy. But thanks for the advice and thanks for the compliment. I just like people, right? I just like talking to people from around the world. By 12 o'clock in the morning, I've spoken to people in 4 different countries, and I'm excited to do it. What'd you have for dinner? What are you listening to? Cool.
So I have a quick question. When you're doing your remote or rural teaching,
Yes.
didactic, how are you applying a clinical or hands-on?
Well, they have clinical sites, right?
Okay.
Yeah, so they, in the radiography programs, they have clinical sites established. How many clinical sites do you have, right, is always the question. 600 clinical sites have worked with Weber State University.
Okay.
But no, they're all
Okay.
at the same time. So we don't do, classroom first and then
Okay.
we bring them in at the same time. Yes?
I just started a hybrid invasive CBT program in Michigan.
Yeah.
I'm curious what you use for your lecture material for your online coursework. Are you synchronous or asynchronous?
It's synchronous.
Okay, we do.
There's no recording of my classes. That's horrifying.
I'm just curious in your modules, what kind of learning material or activities you put in there to make it more engaging when they're actually doing it.
Yeah, we don't. I think it's an insult. Oh, I truly do. But they have modules that are based on the books, but I am not going in there and teaching what they've already read. Right? I put it in context. So when we meet, the stuff you just learned, let's talk about it in the cath lab, which is why I don't record the sessions. There's FERPA we have to worry about, but my students get engaged and active and they're not afraid to make mistakes because they realize that I'm not taping it and it's not going to show up on YouTube in India somewhere. So no, I don't record anything. It's like the old days. You got to sit there and take notes. Imagine that. But no, that's what the meetings are for, to put it in context, right? Go through a case scenario. And so I'm asking questions. It's all.
Just like PowerPoints, they look through, like what do they
Oh, as a guide, yeah, I'll use PowerPoints. Yeah. And also, I think one of the biggest components for online programs too is it really opens up a lot of opportunities for educators that could never stand in front of your classes. So we get speakers from all over the world. Industry's great, but we're looking at 2 things. Did you get anything out of the content? And number 2, what did you think of the presentation? Right? We evaluate them. Now they're paying attention even more. But no, I use PowerPoints. It's a visual game we're in. So lots of slides, lots of pictures of pathology, those kind of things. And just give me a call. I'll be happy to show you what I'm doing. I'm very transparent with everything. No, there's no secrets. I've talked to educators who said, I would never share my PowerPoints. What?
I feel like some of that stuff is very, like I know each individual industry, like Boston Scientific has their learning modules that they do, which are very helpful.
Yeah.
We don't know if the student actually completes.
It's too much content.
And it's third party, so
Yeah.
I looked into doing stuff like Articulate where you build things so they can get some hands-on and that way it's more interactive.
Yeah.
So I was just wondering if
I use guest speakers because they're tired of hearing me blab away, right? It's true. I get a break. So I'll ask other educators. Cath lab is a really broad base of knowledge. I'm not an expert in everything. So I find someone. It's my obligation. It's our obligation to put the best educators in front of our students at all time. And I faked my way through content. And that's just uncomfortable for me. It's so stressful. We've all faked our way through content, just admit it.
So you said you're on your third cohort for the master's in the CVT program. Congratulations, by the way. That's not easy. But I
Thanks.
was just wondering, like, do you track their registry passing rate outcomes, and do you have any data on that from doing this from a hybrid-based approach?
Yeah, everyone passes.
Do they have, like, do
It's
students...
not required in our program either. That's kind
Right. I
yeah.
was just curious, like, you've been in education a long time. Did you notice it trended the same, like, as in person, less or more? Because I think a lot of us would like to do a hybrid-based approach, but we're so worried, are they going to have the same outcome and the same
Yeah.
experiences? That's the big fear,
Yeah.
at least for me.
Well, one of the things that we do is, number one, first semester, quizzes to discussions, right? The ratio between the two. They take a test every module. But then as the program progresses, right, they take less tests and the tests become more meaningful. Because we're not training sprinters for 10-question quizzes. Their last semester, they've got a midterm and a final. And so those are to replicate. We go right into the task list and create questions that are similar. And you've got Glowacki and Summers, you've got all these other things out there you can use. But you have to train your students to take you have to get them ready to walk in that room for their credentialing exam. And so I don't think we do that. So they're high stakes tests that they have to take, and their grade depends on it. And the other thing I do is we give them their final every semester. It helps me track what they're learning and gives them an idea how much depth do I need to learn, how deep do I need to learn on this topic. Gives them an idea what they'll be anticipating. So we haven't had a problem. And I hate to say it, but that's the easy part. We're not teaching the test. We're teaching up here so they learn that. It's an entry-level test, and we're shooting much higher than that.
I do have a question. On your finals, just out of curiosity.
Yeah.
Is it multiple choice, or do you do an
No,
array
I
of
love
different
messing with
ways?
them.
Or
No.
like open-ended to see what is their thought on this subject, and do they understand it to the depth they need to for this field?
Yeah, so it's not multiple choice. And that's the other thing. We transition from simple multiple choice to select all that apply. We don't tell them how many. So we're constantly making the test harder and harder. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you for all you're doing, nationally and internationally. I think if the conference ended right now, we've all would have been better served. Thank you for everything you're doing. I do have a question about your synchronous learning with time zones. How do you deal with that? Like if you're teaching, you said you do synchronous in your hybrid teaching.
Yeah.
So what happens if you have a 3, 6, 10-hour difference in time?
Well, mostly it's just in the United States.
Okay.
Our foreign students move here. They move to Utah. So
Okay.
I'm not teaching abroad
Okay.
online.
Okay.
Because I've done it, and I still do it at 3 in the morning, 1 in the morning.
And you mentioned your students, they procure their own clinical sites.
Yeah.
So do they have any hardships trying to get that accomplished?
I'm sorry.
Do they have any hardships going
Yes,
into
it's hard.
like cold, like I'm here to learn? I mean, do they get like?
Yeah. Well, here's what we do. Usually they have to go. I won't take anyone if they're new to the cath lab that hasn't shadowed, right? Okay. And so they take the responsibility of finding the clinical site, right? Giving me the name of the director, and then we work on it together. So they're not selling. Let's face it, that RTs are easy. There's clinical instructors, there's a whole infrastructure there. Most of our cath labs have never had a student. So, but what it does is establish, I'm a student, I'd like to come to your cath lab, here's what I have to accomplish, right? And so that communication has already been established. They have to let them know what the expectations of the courses are, how many, sometimes it's a dual interview process. Sometimes the students say, no, glad I didn't just go into this blindly. So they have to be aggressive. And many great potential candidates can't find a clinical site. So they tend to fall to the bottom of the list. I know they're interested.
Yeah.
I know they're going to be in this program for good if they have found their clinical site. But once it gets to